we all talk about the metaverse as if we know what it is, but when anyone defines the metaverse, everyone gives a different definition. So, Raul, in your mind, what the hell is the metaverse?
The metaverse is where we live a larger percentage of our life in the digital world than we do in the physical world. That includes augmented reality, virtual reality, 3D and 2D. We are in the metaverse now, essentially, right? We're chatting as if we're sitting in the same room having a coffee, right? We're so used to it now that it doesn't feel like a barrier at all. That's the metaverse. The metaverse is when I can instantaneously pay you money and we don't care what rails it goes across. That's the metaverse. The metaverse is the fact that Apple have now put things in your phone that ping 5 million times a second, I believe it is, that map out your everywhere you are and will create an augmented reality map of the world in granular detail. That map of the world will help you navigate everything. That is the metaverse. The metaverse is not just the Ready Player One gaming world. It's the digitization of everything, where we spend most of our lives being digital. And right now, we wouldn't say, oh, we're living our lives digitally, but we are, right? Because the majority of what we're doing right now, even though we're living in physical spaces, we're actually concentrating and putting the focus of our attention in the digital world. And that's how I think about it. It's that entire nexus where everything comes together and becomes digitally fluid.
So, Raul, would you say what's the relationship between crypto and the metaverse? Would you say that crypto is perhaps like the epicenter of the metaverse because we can actually instantiate our digital assets, or is that just the perspective of a crypto maxi like myself?
Well, we've got to be honest with ourselves that gaming existed without crypto. But what crypto changed was proven ownership in a digital world. So that was a fundamental building block that I think was necessary, much like we had the internet, but we didn't have this transfer of value mechanism. So I think they're one in the same. You know, we also use the term Web 3.0. It's all basically the same thing. It's that seamless digital integration where we don't need to use the physical realm. And I think crypto is the only way that we can have ownership within that world. We can transfer other ways, but we can't have that trusted ownership, which I think is the most important part of it all. Because in which case it's nothing, right? It's not world.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, like, do you think that's there's like a socio-political sort of aspect of this, right? So, so much sci-fi is dystopian. You look at something like Ready Player One, and it's a large corporation that owns everything. They can bend the rules in their favor. And as we're talking about the going into the metaverse, everything's becoming digital, whether we want it to or not. We can try to resist change, but it's inevitable. Humanity's on this trajectory. And so we see Facebook entering in saying they're going to become a metaverse company. You talked about Apple. Well, these are big tech companies. And what's striking is in the digital world, apart from blockchain, apart from crypto, you can't really own anything. An individual has no self-sovereignty over property without crypto or without blockchain. So like maybe sci-fi is dystopian because like they don't really talk about crypto or blockchain, and large companies or large nation states own all of these things. Do you think there's some social political undertone of making sure that the future of the metaverse, that individuals have property rights and some of these basic guarantees? Is that important to your thesis at all?
I think we've all been too led by sci-fi and think that there is one metaverse. I think the metaverse is a much more subtle, total existence that's not based around one thing. That's like saying we only use Facebook as our platform. We will choose which parts of the metaverse to interact with, much as we choose which parts to be online. But I do think it's extremely powerful that you can be a kid in Ethiopia, you can have an avatar, and you could go to online Harvard and compete. And you can't have racism, sexism, or the fact that you're not in the same country and don't have the same advantages. These things are game-changing for society globally. But it also means globally we have to compete with a lot of people. And you're gonna onboard a lot of people into the global workforce. But I think it's all good. I think it's going to create GDP in its own right that is above the kind of GDP of the world, of the physical world as we know it. And I talk about, like social tokens being a layer of value above equity. I think the metaverse is a layer of GDP that exists outside of physical GDP. And I've talked of it akin to discovering the Americas. You discover a new part of the world that you didn't think existed, and suddenly your entire view of the world has to change because now you can create more. And people have this very pie view of the world, and you take a piece of pie out, and it doesn't work that way. The pie can grow, and I think this is the pie about to explode. Does that change this issue that we've got with below trend GDP growth driven by demographics and a lowering of population, right? Because GDP growth used to be population growth plus productivity. Productivity is going up, population growth is going down in almost every country. But maybe GDP per capita is about to explode because of the opportunities of discovering this new world. The other way I get people to get their heads around it is, when I grew up, Russians were poor. And then something magic happened around really happened about 2002, is Russians became rich. Phenomenally, ridiculously, repulsively rich. It was the fastest accumulation of wealth in all recorded human history. Because basically, they just handed over all of the mines and the oil fields and the chemical plants to a bunch of Russians. And it went from state ownership to private hands. And that was new GDP. It's brand new, it just came out of nowhere because you dug oil out of the ground, and we're going to create a whole new metaverse, and it's infinite in size.